Today, we're gonna get something big off my chest. When I was playing around and just attacking enemies, the combat just felt extremely rigid, and I never felt that moment that you feel in many games where you're like, wow, I just hit a really hard hit. That's something I feel like in Windshire is missing, because currently the heavy attacks don't do too much, and the light attacks, they're just light attacks. So we're gonna try to make light attacks feel a little extra spicy, and we're also gonna make combat a bit more fluid, but we'll get to that in a moment. So let's get right into it. So to first go about the system, I have to face a problem that I tried to do before but had no luck doing it. I need to combine both the orc enemy and its ragdoll. This sounds pretty easy, and practically is pretty easy due to Unity's built-in ragdoll wizard, but due to using root motion and animations to move our enemies along, things might get a little tricky. You see, when Unity makes a ragdoll, it adds 3 different components: a rigid body, a collider, and a joint. These 3 behaviors, or to put it simpler, pieces all work together to allow that ragdoll to perform those funny movements we see. The problem is that we're also using a rigid body on the parent object, and if you don't know what a parent object is, it's basically like the top chain of command, so anything inside it, or what we call children, will have to listen and do what it says. Well, just most of the time. We'll get to that in a few moments. If you mix in having rigid bodies on all the bones, colliders on all the bones, and having the children listen to the parent, well, you get something that looks like this. So after talking some with Captain Conrad and doing a lot of homework on ragdolls, I think I know how to get this to all work properly. Basically, if we just turn off what we don't need and figure out a good way to disable and turn stuff back on when we need it, we might be able to get this to work with minimal bugs. Though this is easier said than done. We have a few restrictions we have to consider. We can't really turn off a few things like the main orc's physics, and we cannot touch a few of the bones due to some restrictions that might break what we're trying to do. Oh, you remember how I said most of the time the children listens to their parents? Just like in real life, there are exceptions. Basically, when you apply physics to child bones, they have like a mind of their own, so it causes a few issues. One of them being that when you launch the parent backwards, the child doesn't really want to follow them and just kind of falls straight down. After doing some research and figuring out that it's honestly as simple as connecting the main hip bone to the main parent using some type of joint, I was pretty relieved that it was so easy. Well, that kind of caused another issue, but thankfully when you disable a few other components and only use the ones we need, that fixes most of the problems we're having. So one of the final things I had left to do was add in a stand-up animation for when the orc gets up from being a ragdoll. This threw a few quirks, such as the orc going from a ragdoll position to a fully standing, back to a stand-up animation, but that was all due to transitions with the animations and such, so after forcing the animator to play that animation in the code rather than using the animator system, it worked pretty well. So after days of work, blood, sweat, and tears falling from my face, this is the final result. Just keep in mind though that there are a few kinks left in the system, like the teleporting while standing up, but we're all going to get that resolved and it should be perfect. So getting ragdolls to work was extremely fun to do in the game, but is it really an RPG if there isn't any ranged enemies? Like, come on. RPG ranged enemies just kind of go together. Anyways, let's get to that. Excelsius actually made this model way back, but I'm only getting to implementing this due to like the 50 remakes of the enemies I have done. But Excelsius, it's time for you to shine. Your model is coming alive. First thing we have to do is get the model to just roam around. This wasn't too bad since I have a pretty streamlined way of doing this, and most of it's the same between the other two enemies. So let's just slap this over here, connect this, and boom, the enemy is now wandering. Now that it's properly detecting the player and wandering around the map, let's get him to actually do what he's supposed to and fire at our player. First off, I thought it would be a pretty interesting idea to have the enemy always be able to hit the player. So my first idea was actually to make the arrow velocity change with the distance of the player. This somewhat worked, but when the player was too close to the target, the arrow wouldn't hit him just because he didn't have enough velocity, and with the way gravity and everything works, it just didn't work too well. I asked Captain Conrad if he knew a better way, and he pointed me in the direction of projectile motion. There's a formula that allows the projectile to hit a specific XY coordinate, and that's exactly what we needed it to do. So after messing with the script and a couple of formulas, Captain Conrad and I, again guys, when I say Captain Conrad and I, remove the and I part, and that's kind of really went. But anyways, we finally got it to work properly, and to demonstrate our feature, we actually have our professional marksman showcase what this does. So no matter how fast we want the projectile to move, it will dynamically change the angle that it launches at so that with gravity, it will hit the player. This honestly rivals how interesting it is to watch the ragdoll be launched, because I can be across the entire testing scene and he will still hit us. After getting the archer to properly hit us, the one thing I noticed is that the orc doesn't try to keep a distance away from the target. This would be pretty important because, you know, he uses a ranged weapon, and with ranged weapons, they're not the most effective in close range combat, so getting him to move backwards was a no-brainer, and it didn't take too long. I did have a question for you guys though. Do you guys think that when the archer is too close to the target, should the archer just pull out a sword and run after the enemies, or should he keep backing away like it is currently? I kind of wanted to keep the warrior and the archer separate, but I feel like it could be a really good gameplay mechanic, so let me know down in the comments below. So after getting the archer orc in, I still felt that combat was still a tad stale. Even though the orcs can now ragdoll and be launched, it still felt that the combat was a tad stale. I took a close look at how the player attacked and what animations were being played, and I realized that due to it being a 1-2 attack loop, it just didn't feel satisfying. I really wanted the attacks to look more impactful and like there was weight behind them, so we gotta go back to the drawing board and figure this out. I saw we could actually use about 4 different animations to make a more clean and more interesting attack cycle. Implementing this was super easy, but it still doesn't feel perfect quite yet. I have a few more things I want to try out, and in the next devlog we will hopefully have some better attacks that will feel even more impactful. One thing I did get rid of was the player's heavy attacks for now. They just didn't fit, and I feel like I have to bring heavy attacks back to stage 1. I really want to think about how I want to implement these types of attacks and how they should play out and what effects they should have on enemies and the environment. One more question for you guys. What do you guys think a heavy attack should do in Windshire? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to get your opinions. Not only did I see the player attacks being a bit bland, the orc animations might need some tweaking. Currently the orc animations aren't using root motion, and that made them feel extremely stationary. So switching out their old attacks with some of the players' attacks made the whole experience feel and play out much better. I also added in a new heavy attack to the orcs. I wanted them to have something that they could use that would break the player's defense while blocking, and using this 2-step heavy attack combo felt perfect for that. It doesn't quite do that just yet, but again, in the next devlog I want to make the enemy versus player experience feel very much more exciting. If you guys watched all the way to the end of this video, this is the first video of 2021, so comment down in the description below 2021, and it's just gonna be good luck, so just go ahead and do that. Anyways, this is all I really have for the devlog. It's been one crazy 2 weeks. I know that this devlog came out a tad late, but I had a lot to do, and making this type of devlog took a bit longer. If you guys like the new format, let me know. Comment it down below. You guys have a lot of stuff to let me know about this devlog. I really need your guys' opinions. It makes the game 100 times better. If you guys are new around here, go check out the Patreon page and hit that red button. Let's see how much we can grow our community in 2021. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. Let me know what you guys think of the new physics in Windshire. It definitely took way longer than expected, but it was very much worth it. A huge thank you to Token. Thank you, man, for being such a huge supporter. And thank you to Inconspicuous, Max, Munshir, Tajna, Michael, and Dennis. You guys have been awesome, and thank you all for your support. It's been crazy. And finally, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next devlog. Peace.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.